Welcome back to the channel, and today we're taking a look at the brand new Kansept Cosmos. This is another Paul Munko design. He's got several designs, and it's definitely his design language. He's the same designer of the Kaiser Clairvoyant, the Kaiser Comet, and maybe some other designs out there, but those are the ones I thought of offhand. This knife comes in 4 different variations. My particular one has blasted titanium bolsters with they're calling Nebula carbon fiber. It's kind of like the Chinese version of fat carbon. I'm not always the biggest fan of the way they do this. It's just got too much color in it and not as much reflectivity from the black underneath, at least in my opinion. This particular one though doesn't look all that bad. I don't mind it. You have a nice full-size EDC knife at 7.98 inches long with a 3.5-inch Wharncliffe blade of CPM 20CV steel. This is going to be an outstanding utility blade shape. Very easy to get that tip on the things and drag through, especially because you have that nice, fine, precise point right there. You can trace out some things to get some nice precision cuts. Nice top swedge to thin out that tip some. You have either a large sharpening choil or somewhat of a forward finger choil. I can use it as a forward finger choil if I want to, but it's more of a oversized sharpening choil. Got a nice stone wash finish on this one. I like their stone wash. And you have 2 sets of jimping. One if you're choked back and it grips my thumb perfectly. And if you want to choke up, that's a perfect spot as well to give you some control. You have a flat grind that comes down to around 16 thousandths behind the edge. Why don't we see how this thing performs? The knife came with an excellent edge out of box, and it's really going to excel at breaking down cardboard boxes and other utility tasks. Definitely tip work is going to be excellent, and so far so good. I figured it would do great on this, but we'll see how it does in the rest of the stuff. Now we're testing those ergos. Start out really light and, see how that edge is biting into the wood. Being that it is a straight edge like that, you can have full power from heel to tip. That's one big advantage about a Wharncliffe blade. And for the most part, it's comfortable. I mean, the handle is a little narrow, so, probably wouldn't be something I'd want to do for a long period of time. But no serious hot spots or anything. I can kind of feel the carbon fiber by the bolster lock area. Kind of poked me a little bit. But this is where I noticed right away that the edge even has some bite to it. It's mainly doing a semi-push cut. I raised it up on the block, being that it is a straight edge, because it's absolutely miserable doing this type of cut with a straight edge. You only get that very tip into the cutting board, and it's just not even worth it. But yeah, it's performing nicely. It's comfortable in that pinch grip, especially being that I have the medium raised up. And so far, so good. I've been testing a ton of knives here lately for review, and boy, has it just destroyed my hands. I got some severe blisters all over my hands. Not from this knife, but if anybody knows of any really good gloves, please let me know down in the comments or DM me on Instagram. But we end up getting through 102 cuts, and it still has a pretty good edge to it. It feels like it does, at least. We'll see in just a second. But definitely happy with the way it performed in this particular portion. Now this is what I'm talking about. You got a little scalpel up there. It's going to be excellent for drag cuts. I mean, just blasting through that. And like I said earlier, you can do some cutting on a flat cutting surface, but you'll see how I have to like pull that tip through at the end. Like you might see it here. You got to pull it through, because you're not making that much contact with the cutting surface, with what you're cutting on. But, it can all be done. You just may have to lift it up onto something. Now let's take a look at the deployment action of this knife. You have a very minimal flipper tab, as you can see right there. I did not expect it to work, but you got some jimping, and the way that's set up, you can see how high it is above that pivot. So all you do is push straight down on it. It's pretty thoughtless. And by the time it leaves your finger, the blade's already that far out. So this thing does rock it out. The detent is dialed nicely. It's riding on ceramic bearings with a ceramic detent ball. Mine's very smooth, just some light shakes and it goes to its home. Whoop. Being that you have that flat right there, it's creating a little bit of a wedge. I can reverse flick, but it's not the easiest. You got to put a good bit of pressure on it. So if you're not good at reverse flicking, it might be a little bit difficult. But the main form of deployment is definitely that flipper tab. One good thing about a flipper tab like that is you have nothing sticking out to rub against anything else that you might have in the pocket next to it. And like I said earlier, it allows you to get a lot of momentum once you pull that thing back. Now let's take a look at the handle area. Like I said earlier, you have titanium bolsters on mine. They're blasted with their carbon fiber scales. I like how they didn't go just straight across. They got a little slant there. I can't feel any of the transition spots whatsoever. No voids in the carbon fiber that I see. And like I said, of all the overseas carbon fiber like this is my favorite. You do have a pivot collar around the pivot. Mine's silver. It's on both sides. You have a Torx T8 for the pivot, and in typical Kansept fashion, all the body screws and clip screw and the lock bar insert screw all T6. They refuse to use T8 for some reason. This is considered a bolster lock because the lock is in the bolster right there. So this scale right here is creating an over travel, and I'm sure they probably have, then they have one also connected to that lock bar insert. So definitely you're not going to overspring this one. You have a milled titanium pocket clip that's blind screwed, meaning it's screwed from the inside. I like seeing that, keeps it nice and clean. And as you can see, you have no lanyard hole on the outside. They put a little lanyard pin for all the lanyard people out there. You have a black, I'm guessing, titanium backspacer, and it's tip up right hand carry only. It's not deep carry, but it does sit fairly deep. More than a lot of deep carry clips, but that's all you have sticking out of the pocket. It goes in and out of the pocket nicely. There's enough ramp and enough tension. Lockup on my knife is sitting at around, I'd say 40% or so. Access to the lock bar is okay because it is flush with the show side scale. However, they do have this little chamfer. I wish it could have went a little bit further, but then it would have got too thin right there. Use the fat of my thumb and it's fine. As long as it doesn't get pitched in between the lock bar and the carbon fiber. The lockup on mine, rock solid, no play up or down, left or right. And during my cutting, the only thing I noticed that I could feel, and this is the case 90% of the time, is when I'm choked back like this, which I kind of stayed up here a lot whenever I was doing most of the cutting, but whenever I was choked back like this, the corner right here on the carbon fiber, that right there is bulky. And that's right where your finger sits. Now, if I was left-handed, I don't feel it at all. But right-handed, the fat of my finger is sitting right there at that point. I've seen Riot do a little chamfer around that to knock those off. And, I don't know. It is a little pokey right here, but I don't feel that as much because of this portion of the lock bar. That I did feel. Now, I didn't feel it for majority of the cutting, just whenever I really bear down into the wood. So if that's not something you plan on doing, then it won't ever be an issue for you. And plus, it may not be an issue for you anyway. My hands are a little bit more beat up than the average person. There is no internal milling. However, they milled out a lot of the tie to put the carbon fiber over the top of it on both sides. And it's a pretty slender knife. The weight is 3.48 ounces. That's outstanding. Here's a size comparison with the Ontario Rat 1 and 2. Next up, we have the Kansept Bulldozer and the Kansept Tuckamore. And lastly, we have the Sencut Watuga and the Spyderco PM2. It's almost identical in length to the Watuga. Now, for my nitpicks and complaints, I would have loved to see T8 hardware throughout, but we know Kansept's never going to do that. I would have liked to see a little bit more lock bar access. However, it's not that bad, and it would be super nice if this was cut back some, almost where that chamfer is, but then you can't really do that because of the blade right here. But as it sits, my final thoughts, I loved it. It's a good performer. Mine is very smooth. It's unique looking. It has good action. It's easy to carry. It's nice and lightweight. And overall, I think he did an excellent job. I personally like his design language, and I'd love to hear y'all thoughts. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, please leave those down below. I hope everybody's having an absolute amazing day. I will see y'all on the next one. Hey!